The emergency room doors at Community General Hospital slid open with a gentle hiss on that cold November evening. Rain pounded against the pavement outside, and a gust of wind followed the small figure who stepped inside. The fluorescent lights revealed a young girl, no more than 12 years old, her braided hair dripping wet, her oversized jacket wrapped protectively around a bundle in her arms. Nurse Diane looked up from her computer at the intake desk, her tired eyes widening at the sight. The girl stood there, shoulders trembling slightly, her dark brown skin glistening with raindrops, while she cradled what appeared to be a baby wrapped in a pale yellow blanket. "Help," the girl said, her voice barely audible above the typical sounds of the busy emergency room. "My sister needs help." Diane rushed from behind the counter, guiding the girl to a nearby chair. "Honey, what's your name? What happened?" "I'm Keisha," the girl replied, carefully adjusting the bundle to reveal a tiny face. The infant couldn't have been more than a few days old, with pale skin and wisps of light hair. The contrast between the dark-skinned girl and the white baby immediately raised questions in Diane's mind, but her professional instincts took over. "And this is your sister?" Diane asked gently, already signaling for Dr. Thompson to come over. Keisha nodded, her eyes never leaving the baby's face. "Her name is Hope. She won't eat. I tried everything." Dr. Thompson arrived quickly, a tall woman with kind eyes and a reassuring presence. She knelt before the girl. "Hi, Keisha, I'm Dr. Thompson. Can I take a look at Hope?" Keisha hesitated, holding the baby closer to her chest. "You won't take her away?" "I just want to make sure she's okay," Dr. Thompson assured her. "You did the right thing bringing her here." After a moment, Keisha reluctantly allowed the doctor to take the infant. Dr. Thompson unwrapped the blanket carefully, noting how meticulously the baby had been swaddled despite the makeshift nature of their arrival. The baby was wearing a clean diaper and a onesie that was slightly too big. Hope whimpered but didn't fully cry, a sign that concerned the doctor immediately. "She needs to go to pediatrics right away," Dr. Thompson said, looking at Keisha with both concern and admiration. "How long have you been caring for her?" 3 days, Keisha replied, standing up to follow as a nurse took Hope toward the pediatric emergency area. "Since Mom went away," Diane gently placed a hand on Keisha's shoulder. "Sweetie, where is your mom? Does she know you're here?" Keisha's expression darkened. "I don't know where she is. She had the baby at home. Then she started bleeding a lot. The neighbor called an ambulance. She told me to take care of Hope until she came back, but she never came back." The hospital staff exchanged worried glances. Diane guided Keisha to a quieter area of the waiting room, while Dr. Thompson tended to the infant. Hospital security was notified, along with social services' standard protocol when minors arrived unaccompanied. In the pediatric area, Hope was quickly assessed. The baby was dehydrated but otherwise in surprisingly good condition given the circumstances. Someone had been caring for her with remarkable attention and love. Meanwhile, Diane brought Keisha a hot chocolate and a sandwich from the cafeteria. The girl hadn't mentioned being hungry, but she devoured the food as soon as it was offered, suggesting she hadn't eaten properly in some time. "You walked here?" Diane asked, noticing Keisha's soaked sneakers. Keisha nodded, sipping the hot chocolate. "The buses don't come to our neighborhood after 6. And I couldn't wait any longer. Hope stopped drinking from her bottle this morning." "How far did you walk?" "About 20 blocks, Keisha said matter-of-factly, as though this extraordinary feat was nothing unusual. "I knew this hospital was closest." Diane fought back tears. 20 blocks in the pouring rain, carrying a newborn with no adult help. She couldn't imagine the courage and determination that had taken. By now, Officer Rodriguez from hospital security had arrived, along with Ms. Chen from Child Protective Services, who had been on call that evening. They approached cautiously, not wanting to frighten the girl. "Hi, Keisha," Ms. Chen said with a warm smile, sitting down across from her. "My name is Lily. I work with children who need help. Can we talk about what's been happening at home?" Keisha's guard went up immediately. "Are you going to take Hope away? Or send me to a foster home? Because I'm not going, and I'm not letting you take my sister." Ms. Chen shook her head. "Right now I just want to understand your situation better. You're not in trouble. In fact, I think you've been incredibly brave." Slowly, Keisha began to open up. Her mother, Teresa, had been hiding her pregnancy from everyone. They had recently moved to the neighborhood after leaving Keisha's stepfather, who had become violent. Teresa had given birth at home 4 days ago with only their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Washington to help. Mom started bleeding a lot afterward, Keisha explained, her young voice steady despite the trauma she was describing. Mrs. Washington called an ambulance. Before they took Mom away, she made me promise to take care of Hope. She said not to tell anyone or they might separate us. Do you know which hospital they took your mom to? Officer Rodriguez asked gently. Keisha shook her head. Mrs. Washington might know, but she can't hear her phone ring sometimes. She checked on us once a day, but she can't get up and down the stairs much. Dr. Thompson returned from the pediatric ward, sitting beside Keisha. Hope is going to be okay, she assured the girl, watching relief flood Keisha's face. She's dehydrated and needed some fluids, but she's responding well. We'll need to keep her here for a little while, though. Can I stay with her? Keisha asked immediately. Of course you can, Dr. Thompson replied, exchanging a glance with Ms. Chen. But we also need to find your mom. Do you have any other family members we could call? Keisha shook her head again. It's just us. Mom said we had to start fresh. Just the three of us. While Officer Rodriguez began making calls to other hospitals in the area, trying to locate Teresa, Ms. Chen gently asked Keisha more about the past 3 days. How did you know how to take care of a baby? You did an amazing job keeping Hope healthy. A hint of pride flashed across Keisha's face. Mom got some baby books from the library. I read them all before Hope was born. And there were videos online at the library computer. I took notes. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a folded, slightly damp piece of paper covered in a child's careful handwriting. Feeding times, diaper changing instructions, warming bottles. When Mom didn't come back the first night, I used the emergency money to buy formula at the corner store. But it ran out this morning and Hope started crying different. I knew something was wrong. Ms. Chen was stunned by the level of resourcefulness and maturity. What about school? Have you been going? Keisha looked down. I called the school using Mom's voice and said I was sick. I couldn't leave Hope alone. As the evening progressed, the hospital staff worked to piece together the full story. Officer Rodriguez finally located Teresa Johnson at Memorial Hospital across town. She had suffered severe postpartum hemorrhaging and had been in intensive care, unconscious for most of the past 3 days. With no identification on her when the ambulance brought her in, and in too critical a condition to communicate, the hospital had no way of knowing she had just given birth or that she had left children at home. Dr. Thompson arranged for Keisha to see Hope in the pediatric unit. The girl stood by the small bassinet, gently stroking the baby's cheek with one finger. You're going to be okay now, Keisha whispered to her sister. I kept my promise to Mom. Nurse Diane had found some dry clothes for Keisha from the donation closet, a purple sweatshirt and black leggings that were slightly too big but warm and clean. As the girl stood watch over her sister, the hospital staff observed the bond between them with amazement. She kept that baby alive for 3 days on her own, Dr. Thompson murmured to Ms. Chen. Do you know how extraordinary that is? Ms. Chen nodded. In 15 years of social work, I've never seen anything quite like this. Later that night, with Hope sleeping peacefully under medical supervision, Keisha finally agreed to rest on a cot the nurses had set up next to her sister's bassinet. As she drifted off to sleep, still wearing her shoes as if ready to jump up at any moment, the hospital staff continued their work behind the scenes, contacting Teresa's doctors, arranging for the family's reunion once her condition stabilized, and ensuring both children would remain together. What had begun as a shocking sight, a young black girl walking into the emergency room with a white baby, had revealed itself to be a profound story of family love, childhood resilience, and extraordinary courage. And though Keisha slept now, exhausted from her ordeal, the impact of her actions was still unfolding throughout the hospital, touching everyone who heard about the 12-year-old girl who had walked 20 blocks in the rain to save her baby sister. Morning light filtered through the blinds of the pediatric ward, casting gentle stripes across Keisha's sleeping form. She had spent the night curled up on the hospital cot, one hand stretched through the bars of the bassinet where baby Hope slept. A nurse passing by paused, touched by the sight of the 12-year-old's protective posture even in sleep. Keisha stirred at the sound of the breakfast cart in the hallway. Her eyes flew open, immediately searching for Hope. Finding her sister still sleeping peacefully, the tension in Keisha's small shoulders eased slightly. Good morning, said Nurse Diane, who had returned for the morning shift. She carried a tray with toast, scrambled eggs, and orange juice. Did you sleep okay? Keisha nodded, rubbing her eyes. Is Hope still doing good? She's doing great, Diane assured her. The doctors are very impressed with how well you took care of her. Pride flickered across Keisha's face, but worry quickly replaced it. Did you find my mom? Diane pulled up a chair beside Keisha's cot. Yes, we did. Your mom is at Memorial Hospital across town. She's been very sick, but she's getting better. The doctors there said she woke up last night and has been asking about you and Hope. Tears welled in Keisha's eyes. She's okay? She's really okay? She's going to be fine, Diane said, squeezing Keisha's hand. It might take some time before she's strong enough to come home, but she's going to recover. Keisha wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Can I see her? We're working on arranging that. Ms. Chen from Child Services is coming back this morning to help figure everything out. As if on cue, Lily Chen appeared at the doorway. She wore a different outfit than yesterday, but the same warm smile. With her was a tall man in a button-up shirt and khaki pants. Good morning, Keisha, Ms. Chen said. This is Mr. Patel from the Family Services Department. He's going to help us make sure you and Hope are taken care of until your mom gets better. Keisha eyed Mr. Patel suspiciously. You're not going to separate us, right? Because I promised my mom I'd look after Hope. Mr. Patel sat down in a chair across from Keisha. I understand how important that promise is to you, he said in a gentle voice, and I want to help you keep it. But I also want to make sure both you and Hope are safe and have everything you need. Keisha looked from Mr. Patel to Hope, then back again. I kept her safe, she said defensively. I followed all the instructions. I even walked to the hospital when I knew something was wrong. And that was incredibly brave, Mr. Patel said sincerely. Not many adults would have known what to do in your situation, let alone a 12-year-old. But now you've got people who want to help you, so you don't have to do it all by yourself anymore. While Keisha ate her breakfast, Mr. Patel and Ms. Chen explained what would happen next. They needed to visit the apartment where Keisha and Hope had been staying, to understand the situation better and collect some essential items for both children. Would you be okay showing us around your home? Ms. Chen asked. We can go after the doctor's check on Hope this morning. Keisha hesitated, then nodded. I need to get more clothes for Hope anyway, and feed Mrs. Washington's cat. I promised I'd do that too. Dr. Thompson arrived to examine Hope, who was now awake and looking much better after a night of proper hydration and care. The baby's blue eyes followed Keisha's movements around the room, a connection that didn't go unnoticed by the adults. She knows you're her big sister, Dr. Thompson commented as Keisha carefully stroked Hope's cheek. Babies can sense who loves them and who takes care of them. By mid-morning, arrangements had been made. Hope would stay in the hospital under observation for another day, but was recovering well. Keisha would go with Ms. Chen and Mr. Patel to the apartment, and then they would take her to visit her mother at Memorial Hospital. The drive to Keisha's neighborhood revealed the challenges the young girl had overcome. Her apartment building stood in a neglected area of town with few services nearby. The corner store where Keisha had purchased formula was the only shop within walking distance. You walked all the way to the hospital from here? Mr. Patel asked, unable to hide his amazement. That must have been at least 3 miles. 3.5, Keisha corrected. I counted the blocks. It was raining hard too, but I wrapped Hope in plastic bags under her blanket so she wouldn't get wet. Ms. Chen and Mr. Patel exchanged glances, both struck by the resourcefulness of this child. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building with no elevator. Inside, the modest 2-bedroom unit was surprisingly neat, considering the circumstances. In the living room, a makeshift nursery had been set up. A laundry basket lined with soft blankets served as Hope's crib. Positioned right next to the couch where signs suggested Keisha had been sleeping. On the kitchen counter sat baby bottles, carefully washed and arranged to dry. A notepad nearby had Keisha's feeding schedule, with times meticulously recorded in childish handwriting. The refrigerator contained a half-empty carton of milk and little else. Mom was supposed to go grocery shopping after Hope was born, Keisha explained, seeing Ms. Chen's concern as she surveyed the nearly empty fridge. I finished the last cereal yesterday morning. In Teresa's bedroom, signs of the home birth were still evident. Clean towels were stacked on a chair, and a first aid kit lay open on the nightstand. Books about pregnancy and newborn care were piled on the bed, several with bookmarks and sticky notes poking out, evidence of Keisha's careful studying. Mr. Patel took photos to document the living conditions while Ms. Chen helped Keisha pack a bag with clothes, and personal items. They also gathered what baby supplies remained for Hope. Next door, they checked on Mrs. Washington, the elderly neighbor who had helped during the birth. The old woman answered their knock, clearly relieved to see Keisha. "Child, I've been so worried," she exclaimed, her wrinkled hands grasping Keisha's. "I tried calling the hospitals to find your mama, but nobody would tell me anything." Mrs. Washington invited them in, her apartment similar in layout but filled with old furniture and family photos. The promised cat, an orange tabby, wound its way around Keisha's legs as she filled its bowl. "She's been taking care of both my cat and that baby," Mrs. Washington told Ms. Chen, shaking her head in wonder, coming over every evening to feed marmalade while watching her sister all day and night. "Never seen a child so responsible." Mrs. Washington confirmed the details of Teresa's medical emergency, adding information that helped complete the picture. Teresa had been a single mother since leaving Keisha's abusive stepfather 6 months earlier. Hope had a different father, a man Teresa had briefly dated who had disappeared upon learning of the pregnancy. She was determined to make it on her own, Mrs. Washington explained. Worked 2 jobs right up until the week before the birth. Didn't want nobody knowing her business after what happened with her ex. That's why she had the baby at home. Scared of hospitals asking too many questions. The visit to Mrs. Washington provided valuable context for the case. As they prepared to leave for Memorial Hospital, Mr. Patel assured the elderly woman they would keep her updated on Teresa and the children. The drive to Memorial Hospital was quiet, with Keisha watching the city pass by outside the window. Her small face reflected a mixture of worry and hope, a combination no 12-year-old should have to carry. At the hospital, a social worker from Memorial's staff met them in the lobby. "Teresa is doing much better today," she informed them. "She's still weak but very anxious to see her daughters. We've told her that Hope is receiving good care." As they walked toward the elevator, Keisha suddenly stopped. "What if she's mad at me?" she asked in a small voice. "I promised not to tell anyone about Hope. Mom said it was really important to keep it secret." Ms. Chen knelt down to Keisha's level. "Your mom asked you to keep Hope safe, and that's exactly what you did. When Hope needed medical help, you made the right decision to take her to the hospital. That's not breaking your promise, that's fulfilling it in the best way possible." Keisha considered this, then nodded, squaring her shoulders with newfound confidence. Teresa's hospital room was dim and quiet, filled with the soft beeping of monitors. She lay propped up against pillows, her skin ashen against the white sheets, an IV line running into her arm. When the door opened and she saw Keisha, tears immediately spilled down her cheeks. "My baby," she whispered, arms outstretched. Keisha ran to the bed, falling into her mother's embrace. For several minutes they simply held each other, both crying while the adults stepped back to give them privacy. "I'm so sorry," Teresa said through her tears, stroking Keisha's hair. "I never meant to leave you alone like that." "I took care of Hope just like I promised," Keisha told her proudly. "She got sick yesterday, but I took her to the hospital and now she's getting better." Teresa looked over Keisha's shoulder at Ms. Chen and Mr. Patel. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "Thank you for helping my girls." The hospital room became the setting for an important conversation. Teresa learned about Keisha's extraordinary 3 days of caring for Hope, from the carefully maintained feeding schedule to the long walk through the rain. With each detail, Teresa's expression shifted between horror at what her daughter had endured and pride at her incredible resilience. "You saved your sister's life," Teresa told Keisha, holding her daughter's face between her palms. "Do you understand that? You're the bravest person I've ever known." By the end of the visit, plans had been put in place. Teresa would need at least another week in the hospital. Hope would be discharged the following day. Mr. Patel had arranged temporary emergency foster care for both children with a family who specialized in keeping siblings together during family crises. "Just until I'm back on my feet," Teresa assured Keisha, seeing her daughter's face fall at the mention of foster care. "Then we'll all be together again, I promise." As they prepared to leave, Teresa held Keisha's hand tightly. "You did everything right," she told her daughter. "Everything. I am so proud of you." Those words seemed to lift a weight from Keisha's small shoulders. For the first time since walking into Community General Hospital with her baby sister in her arms, she allowed herself to truly be a 12-year-old girl again, if only for a moment. The Wilson family home sat on a quiet street lined with maple trees just beginning to lose their leaves. It was a modest two-story house with a wide front porch and a swing that creaked gently in the autumn breeze. This would be Keisha and Hope's temporary home while their mother recovered in the hospital. Keisha stood on the sidewalk, clutching the small duffel bag containing her and Hope's belongings, her eyes taking in every detail of the unfamiliar house. Baby Hope was nestled in a proper car seat that Mr. Patel had installed in his car, sleeping peacefully after being discharged from the hospital that morning. "They're good people," Ms. Chen assured Keisha, sensing her nervousness. "Mrs. Wilson has taken care of many children in emergency situations like yours, and they understand how important it is that you and Hope stay together." The front door opened and a plump woman with silver-streaked hair stepped onto the porch. She wore jeans and a bright yellow sweater, and her smile reached all the way to her eyes. "You must be Keisha," she called, waving. "And that little bundle must be Hope. I'm Gloria Wilson. Welcome to our home." Mr. Wilson appeared behind his wife, a tall man with kind eyes and work-roughened hands. He came down the steps to help with the car seat and bags. "Let's get you two settled inside. It's getting chilly out here." The inside of the Wilson home was warm and lived in, with comfortable furniture and walls covered in family photos. Keisha noticed pictures of different children of various ages among what appeared to be the Wilsons' own family members. "Those are all the children who have stayed with us over the years," Mrs. Wilson explained, following Keisha's gaze. "We keep in touch with most of them. Family doesn't have to be just about blood." Keisha nodded, but her eyes remained wary. She had heard about foster homes before. Not always good things. "I've set up the blue bedroom for you," Mrs. Wilson continued, leading the way upstairs. "And we have a bassinet for Hope right next to your bed, just like you had at home. Mr. Patel told us how you never wanted to be far from your sister." The bedroom was simple but cozy, with a twin bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a small desk by the window and a rocking chair in the corner. The promised bassinet stood right beside the bed. "The bathroom is just across the hall," Mrs. Wilson said. "And our room is at the end if you need anything during the night." "Anything at all." Keisha carefully placed Hope in the bassinet, adjusting the blanket around her tiny form. The baby squirmed slightly but continued sleeping. Mrs. Wilson watched from the doorway, impressed by the girl's gentle competence. "You're very good with her," she commented. Keisha shrugged. "I had to be." While Mrs. Wilson went to prepare lunch, Mr. Patel and Ms. Chen sat with Keisha in the living room to explain what would happen next. The temporary placement with the Wilsons was approved for 2 weeks, by which time Teresa would hopefully be released from the hospital. In the meantime, they would arrange transportation for Keisha to visit her mother regularly. "What about school?" Keisha asked suddenly. "I've missed almost a week." "We've contacted your school," Ms. Chen explained. "They know about the family emergency and they'll work with you to catch up. Mrs. Wilson can help you with homework and you'll start back on Monday." Keisha nodded, relieved. Despite everything that had happened, she worried about falling behind in her classes. She had always been a good student, and her mother had instilled in her the importance of education. After lunch, Mr. Patel and Ms. Chen prepared to leave. "I'll be checking in regularly," Ms. Chen promised. "And you have my phone number if you need to talk." Keisha stood on the porch watching their car drive away. For the first time in nearly a week, she wasn't solely responsible for Hope's survival. The realization brought conflicting emotions, relief mixed with a strange sense of loss. Her days had been completely focused on keeping her sister alive, and now that immediate purpose was gone. Mrs. Wilson appeared beside her, not touching, but offering her presence. "It's a lot to take in, isn't it?" Keisha nodded, unable to find words for the tangle of feelings inside her. "Why don't we go see what clothes we have for Hope?" Mrs. Wilson suggested gently. "We keep a supply of baby things for emergencies. Then maybe you'd like to take a proper shower and rest a bit." The afternoon passed in a blur of small, normal activities that felt almost surreal after the intensity of the past week. Keisha helped sort through baby clothes, took a long hot shower, her first in days, and ate a proper home-cooked meal. Mr. Wilson showed her how to use the washing machine to clean Hope's few outfits, and Mrs. Wilson demonstrated how to use their microwave to warm bottles more efficiently than Keisha had been doing on the stove. That evening, as Keisha sat in the rocking chair feeding Hope, Mrs. Wilson brought her a cup of hot chocolate. "You know," she said, settling into a nearby armchair, "in 30 years of fostering children, I've never met anyone quite like you, Keisha. Keisha looked up, surprised. What do you mean? Most 12-year-olds wouldn't have known what to do with a newborn baby. But you not only figured it out, you kept that little one alive and thriving under impossible circumstances. Keisha watched Hope's tiny face as she drank from the bottle. I didn't have a choice. Mom told me to take care of her. There's always a choice, Mrs. Wilson said softly. You could have panicked. You could have run to a neighbor right away. You could have done 100 different things. But you chose to step up and be responsible in a way that most adults would find challenging. Something in Mrs. Wilson's words penetrated Keisha's carefully maintained composure. Her lower lip trembled slightly. I was scared, she admitted in a whisper. Every night. I was so scared I'd do something wrong and Hope would get sick or... She couldn't finish the sentence. Mrs. Wilson moved closer, her hand resting lightly on Keisha's shoulder. Of course you were scared. Any reasonable person would be. But you didn't let the fear stop you from doing what needed to be done. That's what real courage is. The dam broke. Tears spilled down Keisha's cheeks. The emotions she had been holding at bay for days finally overwhelming her. Mrs. Wilson gently took Hope, placing her safely in the bassinet, then returned to wrap her arms around Keisha's shaking shoulders. It's okay to cry now, she murmured. You're safe. Hope is safe. You did it, sweet girl. You did it. The next morning, Dr. Reynolds, a psychologist who worked with the Family Services Department, came to the Wilson home to talk with Keisha. They sat at the kitchen table while Mrs. Wilson took Hope into the living room, giving them privacy. I'd like to understand more about what happened during those 3 days you were alone with Hope. Dr. Reynolds explained. She was a middle-aged woman with braided hair and glasses that kept sliding down her nose. It might help other children in similar situations if we knew how you managed so well. Keisha, more rested and calm after a night in a real bed, shared her story more fully than she had before. She described how she had studied the baby books during her mother's pregnancy, taking notes and asking questions. She explained her system for tracking feedings and diaper changes using the kitchen clock and her school notebook. I pretended it was a science project, Keisha explained, like when we had to observe bean plants growing in class last year and record all the changes. Except this was more important. Dr. Reynolds nodded, taking notes. What did you do when you started running out of formula? I watered it down a little, Keisha admitted, looking ashamed. The book said not to, but I didn't have enough. I tried to give Hope more of the concentrated formula during the day and the watered down one at night when she didn't eat as much anyway. And when did you decide to go to the hospital? Keisha's face grew serious. Hope wouldn't take her bottle yesterday morning. She kept turning her head away and crying, but not her normal cry. It was weaker, and her diaper wasn't as wet as usual. I remembered reading that could mean dehydration. I tried calling Mrs. Washington, but she didn't answer. I knew I had to do something. Dr. Reynolds leaned forward slightly. Keisha, do you understand how exceptional your actions were? Most medical professionals wouldn't expect a 12-year-old to recognize the signs of infant dehydration or know what to do about it. Keisha shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I just did what I had to do. Before leaving, Dr. Reynolds spoke with the Wilsons and Keisha together. What you experienced was a traumatic event, she explained to Keisha. Even though you handled it remarkably well, it's normal to have feelings about it afterward, maybe nightmares or worry or sadness or even anger. All of those feelings are okay. She arranged to meet with Keisha weekly for the next month to help her process the experience. And I'll be talking with your mom too once she's feeling better. She's going to need support as well. That afternoon, Mr. Wilson drove Keisha to Memorial Hospital to visit Teresa. Hope came too, carefully secured in her car seat. It would be the first time the whole family had been together since Teresa's medical emergency. The reunion was emotional. Teresa looked stronger than she had the day before, sitting up in bed with more color in her cheeks. When she saw Hope in the carrier, fresh tears sprang to her eyes. My babies, she said, arms outstretched. Both my precious babies. Keisha carefully lifted Hope and brought her to Teresa's bedside. The mother cradled her newborn daughter, examining every perfect feature. She looks good, Teresa said, voice thick with emotion. You did such a good job with her, Keisha. The hospital staff had been briefed on the family's remarkable story, and news had spread throughout the medical center. Nurses found excuses to pass by Teresa's room, peeking in to see the 12-year-old heroine they'd heard about. Dr. Zhang, Teresa's attending physician, came to check on her while Keisha was there. Your daughter is quite extraordinary, she told Teresa. The pediatricians tell me that if she hadn't recognized the signs of dehydration when she did and brought Hope in, the situation could have become very serious very quickly. Teresa nodded, pride and guilt mingling in her expression. She's always been my little adult. Too much so sometimes. Dr. Zhang checked Teresa's vitals and updated her on her recovery progress. You're doing much better. If everything continues this way, we might be able to discharge you in a week rather than 2. As the doctor left, a hospital administrator appeared in the doorway. He hesitated, then entered the room. Ms. Johnson, I'm Frank Cooper, the patient advocate here at Memorial. I wanted to personally check on you and let you know that we're conducting a full review of what happened when you were brought in. He looked uncomfortable. There were clear procedural failures in how your case was handled. You should have been asked about dependence at home even in your unconscious state. Teresa shifted Hope in her arms. What does that mean? It means the hospital is acknowledging that mistakes were made, Mr. Cooper explained. We're implementing new protocols immediately to prevent this from happening to another family. And we'll be covering all medical expenses for both you and baby Hope as part of our response to these failures. After he left, Teresa turned to Keisha, who had been quietly observing from a chair beside the bed. Do you hear that? Because of what happened to us, they're going to change things. Other children won't end up in your situation. Keisha considered this. That's good, I guess. It's more than good, Teresa said firmly. It means what you went through wasn't for nothing. You didn't just save Hope. You might help save other families too. For the first time since this ordeal began, Keisha felt something beyond fear or determination or exhaustion. She felt proud, not just of surviving but of making a difference. 2 weeks passed in a rhythm that began to feel almost normal. Each morning, Keisha would wake early to feed Hope before getting ready for school. Mrs. Wilson would care for the baby during the day, and Keisha would return to homework, dinner, and evening bottle feedings. 3 times a week, Mr. Wilson would drive them to the hospital to visit Teresa, whose strength was returning more quickly than her doctors had expected. Keisha had returned to school after missing a week. Her teachers had been understanding, though they hadn't been told the full story, just that there had been a family emergency. Only her closest friend Tiana knew the truth. You seriously took care of a newborn all by yourself? Tiana had whispered during lunch on Keisha's first day back. For real? Keisha had nodded, picking at her cafeteria pizza. It wasn't that big a deal. Are you kidding? That's the most grown-up thing I've ever heard of anybody doing. My mom can barely handle my baby brother and she's 37. Keisha had shrugged off the praise, but something about Tiana's reaction had helped her see her actions through different eyes. Maybe what she'd done really was extraordinary. At the Wilson house, Keisha found herself surrounded by a different kind of family life than she was used to. The Wilsons had 2 grown children who visited frequently, bringing their own kids, 3 cousins who treated the foster children like part of the extended family. Sunday dinners were noisy affairs with everyone crowded around a table laden with home-cooked food, sharing stories and laughter. You're quiet today, Mrs. Wilson observed one evening as she and Keisha washed dishes together. Hope was asleep in her bassinet in the living room where Mr. Wilson could keep an eye on her while watching the news. Just thinking, Keisha replied, carefully drying a plate. Penny for your thoughts? Keisha hesitated. My mom says we'll be going home next week. Yes, if the doctors clear her. You're looking forward to that, aren't you? Yeah, but... Keisha trailed off, struggling to find words for her conflicted feelings. Mrs. Wilson waited patiently, understanding in her eyes. It's just, at home it's always been just me and Mom, and now Hope. We don't have all this. Keisha gestured vaguely at the house around them. All these people and the big dinners and everything. Mrs. Wilson nodded thoughtfully. Different isn't better or worse. It's just different. But Hope likes it here. She smiles more. Babies smile more when they're a few weeks old than when they're newborns, Mrs. Wilson explained gently. That's just development. She'd be smiling wherever she was right now. Keisha seemed unconvinced. What if I can't take care of her as good at home? What if Mom has to work all the time again? Mrs. Wilson put down her dishcloth and turned to face Keisha fully. Is that what you're worried about? That things will go back to being too hard? Keisha nodded, eyes downcast. Mom worked 2 jobs before. She was always tired. Now there's hope too. Have you talked to your mom about this? Keisha shook her head. I don't want her to worry. She needs to get better. Mrs. Wilson considered this for a moment. What if I came with you to visit tomorrow and we all talked about it together? Sometimes grown-ups need to hear what kids are worried about so they can make better plans. The next day's hospital visit was different, with Mrs. Wilson accompanying them. Teresa was sitting in a chair beside her bed when they arrived, dressed in her own clothes rather than a hospital gown, a sign of her improving health. Mrs. Wilson, Teresa greeted her with surprise. This is unexpected. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, Mrs. Wilson assured her. I just thought it might be good for us adults to talk a bit about the transition plan for when you're discharged. And Keisha has some thoughts she'd like to share too. With gentle encouragement, Keisha expressed her concerns about returning home, the practical challenges of Teresa's work schedule, the isolation of their apartment building, the lack of support they'd had before. Teresa listened attentively, pain flickering across her face as she realized the burden her daughter had been carrying, even before the crisis with Hope. I've been thinking about some of this too, Teresa admitted when Keisha finished speaking. Things can't go back to the way they were before. I see that now. From her bag, Teresa pulled out a folder of papers. I've been working with the hospital social worker on some plans. The patient advocate, Mr. Cooper, put me in touch with some resources. She spread the papers on her lap. There's a family support program I've applied for. It would provide child care assistance for Hope while I'm at work, so you don't have to be responsible for her all the time, Keisha. And I've talked to my main employer about switching to a day shift permanently, even though it pays a little less. Being home in the evenings with you both is more important. Keisha's shoulders relaxed visibly. Really? Teresa nodded. Really? And there's more. The hospital's patient advocacy program is helping me apply for better housing in a different neighborhood, one closer to your school and to a community center that has after-school programs. We might be able to move as early as next month. Mrs. Wilson smiled encouragingly. Those sound like wonderful plans, Teresa. But what about immediate support when you first go home? The doctors say you still need to take it easy for a few weeks. Teresa's face fell slightly. That part I'm still figuring out. My mother lives too far away to help, and with us being new to the area, I might have a suggestion, Mrs. Wilson said. What would you think about a bridge arrangement? You and the girls could stay with us for the first 2 weeks after discharge until you're stronger. Then we could help you move to your apartment and check in regularly for a while. The relief on Teresa's face was immediate and profound. You would do that? Even though the official foster placement will be over? Mrs. Wilson laughed softly. My dear, in 30 years of doing this work, if there's one thing I've learned, it's that families come in all forms. The paperwork might end, but the relationships don't have to. The day of Teresa's discharge from the hospital arrived with a sense of celebration. Mr. Wilson had decorated the front porch with a welcome home banner, and Mrs. Wilson had prepared Teresa's favorite foods for dinner, information Keisha had shared during their 2 weeks together. Hospital staff gathered to say goodbye to the family, whose story had touched so many. Dr. Zhang presented Teresa with a gift, basket filled with baby supplies and self-care, items for her continued recovery. The nurses from the maternity ward, who had been devastated to learn about Hope's first days of life, had collected gift cards for groceries and essentials. We've never had a case quite like yours, Dr. Zhang told Teresa. It's changed how we approach emergency admissions. We now have a standard protocol to ask about dependents at home, even when patients are unconscious or unable to communicate. Teresa nodded. Hope nestled against her chest in a baby carrier. My daughter did that, she said proudly, her arm around Keisha's shoulders. She showed everyone where the gaps in the system were. In the Wilsons' van on the way home, Teresa held Keisha's hand tightly. I want you to know something, she said softly. What happened wasn't fair to you. No child should have to do what you did. I'm so sorry you were put in that position. Keisha looked at her mother, surprised by the apology. It wasn't your fault, Mom, you got sick. Still, as your mother, I'm supposed to protect you from having to grow up too fast. And I haven't always done that well enough. Teresa's eyes were earnest, but I promise you things are going to be different now. You get to be 12. That's your only job. At the Wilson house, a small gathering waited to welcome them. Lily Chen from Child Services, Dr. Reynolds, the psychologist, Mrs. Washington, the elderly neighbor, who had been picked up by Mr. Wilson's son, and even Mr. Patel had come to celebrate this milestone. "When I first met you, Keisha," Mr. Patel said during the informal dinner, "I was amazed by your resourcefulness. But what I've come to admire even more is your heart. You didn't just keep Hope physically alive, you gave her love and security during a crisis. That's something many adults struggle to provide in much easier circumstances." Keisha, unused to such attention and praise, ducked her head shyly, but there was a new confidence in her posture that hadn't been there before. After dinner, as the adults chatted in the living room, Keisha slipped upstairs to check on Hope, who was napping in the bassinet that had been moved to the guest room where Teresa would sleep. Standing over her baby sister, watching the gentle rise and fall of her tiny chest, Keisha felt a swell of emotion that was different from the desperate protectiveness of those 3 harrowing days. This was calmer, deeper, a certainty that they would be okay, all 3 of them together. Mrs. Wilson appeared in the doorway. "She's growing so fast," she commented quietly. Keisha nodded. "A whole pound since she came to the hospital. You know, we're just across town. Anytime you need a break or just want to visit, our door is always open." "Thanks," Keisha said, meaning it. "For everything. You're very welcome. But I should be thanking you." Keisha looked up confused. "For what?" "For reminding me why we do this work. Sometimes fostering can be heartbreaking or frustrating. Then someone like you comes along and renews my faith in the resilience of children." Mrs. Wilson smiled warmly. "You're going to do remarkable things in your life, Keisha. This is just the beginning." Downstairs, someone called for Keisha. A cake was being served to celebrate Teresa's homecoming and Hope's 1-month birthday, milestones that had seemed impossibly distant in the emergency room just 2 weeks earlier. As Keisha descended the stairs, she could hear the warm murmur of conversation and occasional bursts of laughter. For the first time since this ordeal began, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged, not carrying an impossible burden alone, but surrounded by a community that had formed, almost magically, around her small family. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be adjustments as Teresa recovered, as they moved to a new neighborhood, as Hope grew and their family found its new normal. But Keisha now understood something profound. They weren't alone anymore. And sometimes that made all the difference. 6 months had passed since that rainy night when Keisha walked into Community General Hospital carrying her newborn sister. Spring had arrived, bringing fresh green leaves to the maple trees that lined the street of their new neighborhood. Hope, now a chubby 7-month-old with bright eyes and 2 tiny teeth, sat in a baby swing in the small park across from their apartment building, giggling as Keisha gently pushed her. Life had changed dramatically for the Johnson family. Their new 2-bedroom apartment was on the ground floor of a well-maintained building, with large windows that filled the rooms with sunlight. It was close enough to Keisha's school that she could walk there in 10 minutes, and just 2 blocks from the community center that had become an important part of their lives. Teresa emerged from their building, waving as she crossed the street to join her daughters in the park. She wore a navy blue uniform with a name badge, her new job at the hospital administration office, a position that Mr. Cooper had helped her secure after she recovered. "There's my girls," Teresa called, sitting on the bench beside the swing set. "Having fun?" Keisha nodded, continuing to push Hope gently. "She loves being outside. Mrs. Wilson says she's going to be walking before we know it. She's already trying to pull herself up on everything." Teresa smiled, watching her older daughter with her younger one. The bond between them was extraordinary, forged in crisis but flourishing in calmer times. Hope's eyes followed Keisha everywhere, lighting up whenever her big sister entered a room. "I spoke to Dr. Reynolds today," Teresa mentioned casually. The psychologist had continued working with their family, helping Teresa process her guilt and trauma while supporting Keisha in finding a healthy balance between childhood and responsibility. "Yeah? What did she say?" "She asked if you'd be willing to talk to another girl. She's 14 and she took care of her younger siblings during Hurricane Laura last month when their house flooded and they got separated from their parents. Dr. Reynolds thinks hearing your story might help her." Keisha considered this, her brow furrowing slightly. "What would I say to her?" "Just your experience, how you felt then, how you feel now, things that helped you." Teresa reached out to smooth Keisha's hair, now styled in neat braids. "You don't have to if you're not comfortable." "No, I think I want to," Keisha decided after a moment. if it would help her. Their conversation was interrupted by a cheerful greeting. Mrs. Wilson was walking her dog, a golden retriever named Buddy, who immediately strained at his leash upon seeing the family. "Just the people I was hoping to run into," Mrs. Wilson said, sitting beside Teresa while Buddy wagged his tail enthusiastically at Keisha. "I wanted to talk to you about the community center fundraiser next weekend." In the months since Teresa's discharge from the hospital, the Wilsons had remained a steady presence in their lives. Sunday dinners at the Wilson home were a regular tradition, and Mrs. Wilson had become something of a grandmother figure to both girls. The director asked if Keisha would consider sharing a bit of her story at the event. Mrs. Wilson explained. "Just a few minutes. They're raising money for the emergency childcare program, and your family's experience is exactly why programs like that are so important." Teresa looked at Keisha, leaving the decision entirely up to her. "What do you think, honey?" Keisha stopped pushing the swing for a moment, her face serious. "Would I have to talk in front of a lot of people?" "Maybe 30 or 40, Mrs. Wilson estimated. "But I'd be right there with you. We could practice what you want to say beforehand. Would it help other kids? Kids who might end up like me, taking care of babies by themselves?" Mrs. Wilson nodded. "That's exactly who it would help. The program provides emergency child care for families in crisis, when a parent is hospitalized or there's no one else to watch the children." "Okay," Keisha said, her voice growing more confident. "I'll do it." The community center was decorated with colorful streamers and balloons for the fundraising event. Tables were set up around the perimeter of the main room, displaying information about various family support programs. In the center, rows of chairs faced a small stage where a podium stood. Keisha sat in the front row beside Teresa, who held Hope on her lap. The baby wore a frilly yellow dress and tiny white shoes, her hair adorned with matching yellow bows. She babbled happily, reaching for the program in Teresa's hands. More people filed in than Mrs. Wilson had estimated, closer to 60 adults filling the chairs and standing along the walls. Among them were familiar faces, Mr. Patel and Ms. Chen from Family Services, Dr. Thompson and Nurse Diane from Community General, even Mrs. Washington, who had moved into a senior apartment in their new neighborhood with the help of the community center's housing program. The center's director, Mrs. Ortiz, opened the event with a warm welcome and an overview of the programs they offered. She spoke about the gaps in the social safety net and how their emergency childcare initiative aimed to catch families before they fell through those gaps. "And now," Mrs. Ortiz said, "I'd like to introduce someone whose story illustrates exactly why this work matters. Keisha Johnson is 13 years old. 6 months ago, she faced a situation no child should ever have to face. Please welcome Keisha and Mrs. Gloria Wilson." Heart-pounding, Keisha walked to the stage, Mrs. Wilson's reassuring presence beside her. They had practiced her short speech several times, but standing before all these adults made the words temporarily flee from her mind. Mrs. Wilson spoke first, providing context about how she had met Keisha and the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. Then she turned to Keisha with an encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, Keisha stepped up to the microphone. "My name is Keisha," she began, her voice initially quiet but growing stronger with each word. "Last year, my mom had my baby sister at home. There were complications and Mom had to go to the hospital. She told me to take care of Hope until she got back, but she was unconscious for 3 days. I was alone with a newborn baby." The room was completely silent as Keisha continued, describing how she had followed the baby books, carefully tracked feedings, and eventually walked to the hospital when she recognized that Hope was becoming dehydrated. "I was scared all the time," she admitted. "Not just for Hope, but scared I was doing everything wrong. Scared Mom wouldn't come back. Scared someone would take my sister away if they found out we were alone." She paused, looking out at the audience. Many eyes were glistening with tears. "The thing is, none of this had to happen," Keisha continued. "If there had been an emergency childcare program, someone would have checked on us. If the hospital had asked Mom about her kids at home, they would have found us right away. If we had known about family support services before the emergency, we wouldn't have been so alone." Mrs. Wilson placed a supportive hand on Keisha's shoulder as she delivered her final thoughts. "Now we have help. We have a community. And that's what every family needs, especially in a crisis. No kid should have to do what I did, but every kid should have people who care enough to create programs like this one. Thank you." The applause was immediate and thunderous. Teresa stood, hope on her hip, pride shining through her tears. One by one, others rose as well, until the entire room was on its feet. After the formal event ended, people gathered around Keisha, sharing their reactions to her story. A local news reporter asked if she would be willing to be interviewed for a feature about the community center's programs. The mayor, who had attended quietly at the back of the room, came forward to shake her hand. "Young lady," he said seriously, "your story has moved me deeply. I'd like to invite you to speak at the city council meeting next month, when we discuss funding for family support services." Overwhelmed by the attention, Keisha sought refuge with the Wilsons, who stood chatting with Teresa and Hope near the refreshment table. "You did wonderfully," Mrs. Wilson assured her. "I'm so proud of you." Mr. Wilson nodded agreement. "You have a way of speaking from the heart that makes people really listen. That's a rare gift." As the crowd thinned, Keisha found herself approached by a girl about her own age, hanging back shyly with a woman who appeared to be her mother. "Are you Keisha?" the girl asked hesitantly. "The one who took care of her baby sister?" Keisha nodded. "I'm Zoe. Dr. Reynolds told me about you." The girl twisted her hands nervously. "My mom just had twins, and I'm scared all the time that something will happen and I'll have to take care of them alone. Especially after the hurricane and everything." Understanding immediately, Keisha moved away from the adults to speak privately with Zoe. Their conversation was brief but intense, heads bent together in that unique way that children share secrets and worries that adults can't quite understand. When they returned to the group, both girls seemed lighter somehow. "What did you tell her?" Teresa asked curiously as they walked home later, Hope asleep against her shoulder. Keisha considered the question. "I told her it's okay to be scared. But I also told her about all the people who helped us after. You, the Wilsons, Dr. Reynolds, everyone. I said she doesn't have to do it alone, and neither do her parents. There's help if you know where to find it." Teresa nodded, wrapping her free arm around Keisha's shoulders. "That's exactly right." As they approached their apartment building, the setting sun cast long shadows across the street. A group of children played basketball at the court beside the park, their laughter carrying on the evening air. It was a normal scene in a normal neighborhood, exactly the kind of everyday peace that had once seemed so far out of reach. Later that evening, after Hope was asleep in her crib, a proper one now, with a mobile of stars and moons hanging above, Keisha sat at the small desk in her bedroom, working on a school assignment. It was an essay for English class about personal heroes. Teresa knocked softly on the open door. "Almost bedtime, sweetheart." Keisha looked up from her notebook. "Mom, do you think what I did really matters? I mean, in the big picture." Teresa sat on the edge of Keisha's bed. "What makes you ask that?" "All those people today. They acted like I did something amazing. But I just did what anyone would do." "No," Teresa said firmly. "Not anyone would have done what you did. Most adults wouldn't have managed half as well as you did." She took Keisha's hand in hers. "But more importantly, your story has already changed things." The hospital changed their policies. The community center raised over $5,000 today for their emergency childcare program. That girl Zoe left feeling less afraid than when she arrived. Teresa gently tucked a stray braid behind Keisha's ear. "Sometimes the biggest changes start with one person doing something extraordinary in a difficult moment. That's you, my brave girl. That's the ripple effect of your courage." Keisha considered this, a small smile forming. "I like that. The ripple effect." "So yes," Teresa concluded, "what you did matters enormously in the big picture. It matters to Hope, who's healthy and thriving because of you. It matters to me, who has both her daughters because of you. And it matters to all those families who will get help before they end up in a crisis like ours." Outside, the neighborhood settled into the quiet rhythms of evening. Inside the Johnson apartment, a new chapter was being written, one where a 12-year-old's desperate walk through the rain with a newborn in her arms had transformed not just into a story of survival, but into a catalyst for change that would ripple outward in ways she was only beginning to understand.